Welcome to another episode of the Akiona Law Podcast, wherein we talk about anything and everything that intersects in the areas of family law, collaborative divorce, and divorce. And today I have with me domestic violence, intimate partner survivor, counselor Kate Mageau. Did I say the last name correctly?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate. And so glad to have you here today talking about this very important topic of domestic violence and intimate partner violence, known as DV for short, for domestic violence, and intimate partner violence is IPV. And you yourself, and I love how you say that you're a survivor and not a victim.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're going to get in today is you wrote a series of books called The Warning Signs. And it was a memoir about your experience of domestic violence. Can you go into that? What prompted you to write these books, to create this memoir? Because I imagine it must have been pretty difficult.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it was very, very difficult. But after I went through my experience with domestic violence and I started getting help and learning about DV and learning about how there's all these patterns and there's all these resources out there for help, I was just shocked that this was all brand new information to me, that I had never known what any of it was. I mean, at the time I went through it, I had never heard of gaslighting before. And so people need to know these things. And so I thought, I need to tell my story. I kept telling all my friends different things from the story at different times. And I'm like, my friends are tired of hearing about it, but society needs to know. And what better way to help people? So yeah, I started writing my books, probably actually seriously getting into writing in 2018, and then finished writing them just last year as I was finishing my Master's of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling, adding new information I had learned along the way to support the book.
Okay. And it's 3 books.
Mm-hmm.
And can you take us to the different, what is in the 3 different volumes? Because there's a pattern that you go through with these books.
Yeah. So it's one story, but after each chapter in the story, I explained what the warning signs were, what the actual domestic violence was that was occurring. And so after I put all that extra information into the story, it was very long. So I split it up. And so the first one is getting to know the person that I end up marrying. And so it's the dating and the courting and the everything feels good up through the wedding day. That's the first book.
We got to get into what happened on the wedding day.
Okay. Yeah. And then the second book is what's happening in the relationship and how does our marriage go. And I'm starting to see signs at this point, but I didn't know anything about DV, so I didn't even know that these were signs until looking back and writing it and getting, the help and support to do so. And then in the third book, I am kind of figuring out what should happen next in my life.
Yeah. And I love and folks, don't feel intimidated by the 3 books, because they are an easy read, meaning Kate is a good writer. And I was so pulled into your story. I could feel my own emotions were heightened, elevated, kind of going through what you've been through. And the warning signs, oh my gosh, I just love the warning signs, because you just kind of connect the dots. And it's so helpful to have that explained, because when you're in that situation, like you're saying, a lot of us, and especially with Jason, who was your partner in intimate partner violence, is is essentially domestic violence between partners in an intimate relationship.
Mhm.
And the signs there are so subtle. They're so subtle, and it's so easy to see how you overlooked it. So let's get into, so, and how long were you and Jason dating before you two got married?
2.5 years, and then we were married for about 2.5 years, so 5 years altogether. But yeah, nothing like out of the norm. Like, I think it's perfectly common for people to be married 2.5, or to be dating and engaged 2.5 years. And
Yeah. And you know what I love too? I love the, okay, I mean, there's just so much things to talk about, but I love how I love how you're talking about that part of you knew the warning signs were there, but you overlooked it because you were determined, you were on a mission, you had a life plan. You have a
Mhm,
life plan that
mhm.
you were going to get married by a certain age, and then you're going to get a house, and then you're going to have kids. And you're an optimist as well.
Yeah,
So, you know, you tend to believe the best in people.
yeah, of course.
And you were just so determined to make the relationship work, be on track with your life plan. Can you go into that? Like, what are some of the warning signs that you saw in the beginning, but then you overlooked it because you're like, I'm on this plan?
Um, yes, but let me go into that a little bit, because it's not so they're not so obvious, right? Like, there's little things of like him being selfish, or like, I think that would probably be the biggest sign. That was there in the very, very beginning. Um, but I just thought, well, I think the thing is I didn't bother to stop and check in with myself about how I was feeling. I didn't know much about like connecting my mind and my body and
Mhm.
listening to my gut instincts.
Yeah.
I just thought, oh, this is annoying, but like, nobody's perfect. I can just move on, because like, everybody I meet is gonna have something annoying about them, and this will be fine. I can work through this.
Yeah. And you mentioned in terms like one example of his selfishness, how his selfishness was you were mentioning how after you two had a long day of work, you would then go to his parents' house and you would be starving because
Yeah,
you eat
we
small,
hadn't had dinner.
yeah, and you wouldn't have dinner until after his parents' house, right?
Hmm.
And you told Jason that you were hungry, and it was almost as like you had to barter with him to get something to eat because he wasn't hungry, so it didn't bother him.
Hmm.
Did
Yeah, that is being dismissive, which is a form of emotional abuse, actually, to like just not care about the other person's feelings, or in this case, like actual physiological needs, like to eat.
yeah. And so can you go into that? I think what ended up happening was that I think you finally got him to agree to, before to go into his parents' house, you guys could stop and you could pick up something.
Um, yeah, I guess I finally, like, I would tell him like, hey, we need to eat.
Mhm.
And he's like, oh, I don't, whatever, like, it's not important. And so
Yeah, it's not important.
finally like convinced him we could stop by Safeway and pick something up. Like, why do I have to convince somebody to let me eat?
You're like, damn it, can I just get like some sort of a roll here or something? I don't know. I know. I was like, oh my gosh, what? She wasn't eating until like 9 o'clock at night. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Right, which is also like, looking back, and I don't like put this thought into the story, but like, basically anytime I go to somebody's house, especially somebody's parents' house, people are gonna see, are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Can I get you anything? Like, why did that not happen? Like, family traits.
Yeah, and I was just kind of curious too. I'm like, why? I thought you were going to their house to hang out and eat dinner. I didn't realize you weren't eating at all. Um, and people may think it's a small thing, but no, it's not. It's actually a big thing. And it, like you said, it was just the first of many signs that Jason did not consider your feelings,
Correct.
anyone else's feelings. Like you said, he was dismissive. And and I think you even went into it's like you're constantly compromising your
Mhm.
um constantly compromising your own needs, your own wants for Jason.
Mhm.
And I think you even said like it even went into the TV shows that you two would want to watch.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I mean, he had this whole list of shows that he would knew would come on different nights. He like literally like had it listed in a notepad of these are my shows and this is when we're gonna get a TiVo now and we're gonna record them and these are the ones that I've chosen and I just went with it. But before I started dating him, I actually had like not had cable for the last few years. I got like documentaries delivered via DVD, Netflix. Like that's what I was into. And then, oh, okay, we're gonna watch sitcoms. Cool.
Yeah. So, and what you didn't get to watch any of the shows that you wanted to watch? Was that?
I preferred at that time, like my strong preference was to watch documentaries
Oh,
on
yeah.
Rachel Maddow, like things that he was just not into or okay with.
So would he ever want to watch one? Would he ever watch a documentary with you?
Oh God, I don't think he did.
Oh, okay.
I think, but I think that's also part of the compromise is that I just kind of gave up asking certain things. It just wasn't worth the trouble to like
You-
have another argument about it.
yeah. And you know what I thought was really interesting too? You gave up being a vegetarian for him.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I had I've been vegetarian for like a couple of years, like on and off different times in my life, but at that point it had been like 2 or 3 years. And he really only liked to either go to fast food
Yeah.
or to a dive bar to get I don't know, wings or pizza or something. And that's basically all he would eat. And I was like, we cannot live like this.
Yeah.
It's not good for our health. And also it's expensive. We can cook. I didn't really know how to cook. I had to learn. But then as I'm trying to teach myself how to cook, I'm also realizing like, okay, I guess I have to make meat for him. That's the
Mm.
only thing that will work for him. And it's too hard to try and figure out 2 meals. So
Hey,
yeah.
I was shocked too. I was like, she's preparing 2 meals.
Yeah, but it's just like one of those subtle compromises where I'm just like, okay, well, this is a lot of effort. It's not worth it. Like,
Yeah. And it was it was funny because his diet was so limited. It was you mentioned it was pizza, burgers, and chicken strips.
yeah,
And he lived off of cola and energy drinks.
yeah,
Yeah, and what kind of shocked me is that you would think as a partner, he would appreciate you trying to instill healthy habits.
yes, yes,
He did it.
yeah. Like my current partner, he's like, oh my gosh, I'm eating so many more vegetables. This is great. Thank you. Like that's an appropriate response.
And I think I even read somewhere that you had made a sauce, and I think you had like tried to sneak a vegetable in it, and he made a face. You said, "Well, if you don't like this sauce, I'll make you another one." And I was like, "What? Where's she at?" And just the fact, Kate, that you didn't know how to cook. And let me say, whatever you do, you go to town. Like I'm just so impressed. Like you go like 120% into things, and you were like when she learned how to cook, folks. Like you were even you learned how to do French cooking, right?
Yeah.
And you're making like all these wonderful meals with sauces and just it sounded so fancy. And he just was did not appreciate that at all. Didn't care.
No. Yeah.
Didn't care. And that was it was sad. It was sad how you put so much time, so much effort. You were you were being the good wife.
Yeah.
And let me take care of you. Let me take care. Let's do things for us. And then just to have that complete meh, this sucks. Because he complained about your cooking, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah, of course. And that's one of these things, like one of these patterns in DV is the constant well, I want to say boundary pushing, that's not quite the word I'm looking for. moving the goalpost.
Yeah.
So wherever I'm at, like, okay, so let's say I cooked a meal and it's like, I maybe give it a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 6. And that's not good enough for him, or maybe it's somewhat meh, I'll accept it. So
Yeah.
then I'm like, okay, well, I have to make it better. So then the next dinner, it's like a 7. And then it's like, okay, well, that's still meh. Okay, well, I guess I have to make it better. Like there's no win. There's no, oh, this is great. I appreciate this. And so as the survivor, you're just trying to catch up to where you can figure out how you can try and make him happy,
Yeah.
which I also learned later in life that like we cannot make someone else happy. We can do nice things for people
Mm,
and we can have connection with people, but I can't directly affect somebody else's happiness overall.
right. Right. And let's get in. You use the term survivor instead of
Mm,
victim. Let's
yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah, it's for one, it's empowering. That's the main reason, right? Is that I'm a survivor because I survived this relationship that had I not left, I could have been murdered. In many of these cases, when they escalate, the violence gets worse and worse and worse,
Right.
especially if the person tries to leave, and it can lead to murder. So a person that was murdered by their abuser is a victim. A person that was able to get out survived. And so
Ah, yeah.
you,
Yeah. I love that. I love that terminology, a survivor, because we survived this experience, and it's hard because and I as you go more on, you talk about in the second book how you're drinking a bottle of wine of night because you're just in a way just trying to numb things and just kind of disassociate from what you're going through. And uh I myself have been in a domestic violence situation when I was younger, and it was my first significant relationship, and it was off and on from the age of 18 to about 25, and it was so hard to leave because then he would pull me back in.
mhm,
And to this day, I still, it's hard because there's just, for one thing, you just don't recognize that you're in it. And like when you're in it, it's so hard to leave because the trauma bonding, and we'll get into that. But it's like, even now, here we are, like a good 25 years later. And I feel like I still have a little bit of that PTSD for being in that relationship, because every now and then I'll have a dream, and in my dream, he'll be there, and I'm trying to get away from him and I can't.
mhm.
So it's lasting effects for sure. And I do like the term that, I'm, instead of being a victim, which implies almost sort of a weakness, I'm a survivor.
Yeah.
So going into okay, so let's get into, I think another thing that we have to touch upon too is that you notice that there was also some sort of warning signs from his family. Yeah, can
Yeah.
you talk about that?
Yeah. It's harder, right? Like I feel like it's hard to know because I'm not in the same close relationship with my family as I was with my husband, um, or with his family rather. But there was just, I don't know, a few odd things that I feel like together make a warning sign, but separately it was like, well, I don't know, but like his parents didn't have any of their own friends, and so his parents consumed their lives with their children's lives. And so
They're
there's
adult children.
yes, adult children, yes. Yeah, there's 3 children, they're all consumed together, and there's just it's like their own version of a trauma bond perhaps, but this codependency and trauma bonds have a lot of overlap in meaning. But when one or more people are so enmeshed with one another that their lives don't seem separate,
Hmm.
that's what was going on in their family. And so that codependency was already something that he was used to, that then quickly formed between him and I think that was probably the main thing.
And you
I,
talk
oh,
go
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you talked about it in the beginning, how looking back now, you realize how quickly you fell into this codependent relationship. Because you folks moved in pretty quickly together, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So, I mean, we were together quite a while before getting married, but our relationship did end up moving pretty quickly. Um, I had moved to Tacoma, and there's the neighborhood I had chosen that I didn't really know well, did not end up being safe. And so I ended up moving in with him in a place I was somewhat safer.
In a
And
studio, right? It
what's that?
was a studio, right?
Yes, yeah, it's a studio. Um, and then our jobs said we are going to close this call center and outsource all the jobs. And if you want to stay employed with us in 2009 in a recession,
Yeah.
then you can apply for the jobs in Las Vegas. And so it not only became like very fast, like moving in within a couple of months together, I thought, well, I'll still be near my family in Seattle. Tacoma is not, a stretch. But then we just ended up in Las Vegas.
So you guys, and the thing is too, is that you folks were working together.
Yes.
Working together, you're spending all your time at night, and then you move in together after a couple months of dating.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about how it just felt natural because you felt like you were in love,
Yeah.
what it must feel like. But looking back now, what do you see? What do you see now? Well, no, that was codependency. Because
Yeah, that we had completely intertwined our lives. We met at work, and so we had the same work schedule,
yeah.
and we would take our breaks together. We would talk during work. We had met the same friends group during work, and also like not like Tacoma and Seattle are that far away, but when you're kind of far away, like okay,
And with
those are my
traffic.
yeah. So I had chosen to like move to Tacoma for this job, and so I wanted to make new friends in Tacoma, and so I was just intertwined in his world with his friends, with our work friends. Um, we would all talk about work. We would all go to the same places together. And that's how he and I ended up, becoming closer, becoming together. And then it was just like, there's never any question of doing something different on a day after work. It was always, what are we going to do? Just automatic. There was never a time where he or I said, oh, I'm going to go home by myself tonight, or I'm going to go see a different friend group tonight.
I see. And well, not only that, and then you're hanging out with his parents a lot too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I felt like I was part of their family really quickly, which I think also helped me feel more in love because I felt like, oh, I'm included in his family too. And I feel that they're including me somewhat. Um,
And the thing that's interesting about his family, you're talking about codependency and how, his parents are so much older. They don't have their own separate set of friends intertwined. Their lives are enmeshed with their adult children. But one thing that I thought was telling was just the constant complaining, teasing about the mom's cooking.
yes.
And it's just like, okay, so would the dad cook then? Or they just get takeout all the time?
The dad would grill in
Dad
the
would
summer.
in the summer.
Right. Other than that, they would have takeout and fast food pretty
Oh,
much.
so disgusting.
Yeah. And so that's what he was used to. He was like, this is my life. And sure, people can try and cook, but it's never going to be as good as this fast food. So we're going to make fun of it.
Yeah, and you know what's and for me, it's like my mom. So my mom was a single mom, and yeah, was me and my sister. And growing up, we always had home cooked meals. Like my mom, like we hardly went out to restaurants. We hardly ate fast foods, and just like for me, cooking for someone is like a love language for me.
Yes.
Yeah, and if someone were to criticize me, oh.
Right.
Like it just like the grocery shopping, the prep work, the cook, and to be criticized. Like I wish now my mom would cook for me. It's such a treat. And I couldn't like I was in my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, how dare they criticize their mom for trying to cook? But right there was a big warning sign because it just shows like this lack of appreciation, this lack of empathy and respect for all that hard work that the mom did. And
Right.
I think,
Cooking is,
yeah, go ahead.
um, it's not just about the time and the money and the energy, but it's that love that you put into it. So it's that emotional energy you're giving to make something nice for someone and to not have that respected for his mom or for me.
Or for you.
Mhm.
You put a lot of time into that. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to taste Kate's. I mean, it's just fabulous. I remember one time I think I made spaghetti or something, and my husband, whatever, he made a complaint because it tasted different. And I was like, you know what? If you don't like it, you can go ahead and make it yourself then.
Right.
Because it's not easy. Well, spaghetti actually is easy. That's why even more so I was irritated.
It depends on how you do it. You can make a more complicated spaghetti if you would like.
Yeah.
Roast the tomatoes. Really good when you do that.
What? Say that again?
You can roast the tomatoes.
Ooh. Ooh. And then make your sauce from that?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that sounds fabulous. That's fancy.
Yeah. Yeah. So it depends, what you want to get into with your spaghetti.
Okay. And another thing that his family, okay, we're not even going to bring the politics because you just got slammed whenever you brought up politics with
Oh
your
yeah.
family because they were Republicans, liberal, but
But they didn't claim they're Republican. I think if they claimed it, I might have had a different reaction, right? They're like, oh
they're
no.
fiscally conservative.
Yes.
But to just not even have that like this kind of like an open discourse. You were just completely just shut down. And the
Yeah.
way you were shut down, you just it's in my head, I just felt like, ooh, they just made you feel really small. I felt. Is
Yes.
that how you felt?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, in the first book, there's a scene of it where I'm just starting to like get to know
Yeah.
them and can I talk about it? And I just felt like, oh, okay, I guess I'm not allowed to talk about it. In the second book, it comes up again, and I'm literally like cornered and backed into a hallway and
Yeah.
physically and emotionally like backed into a corner to not speak about it. And the political things we're talking about it was healthcare, like human rights, So I'm like, I'm just so upset for like the world also. Like, what do you mean people shouldn't have healthcare?
Yeah. And it was Jason and his dad that backed you into that corner in your apartment in Vegas, which it was sad that the dad was doing that too.
Yeah.
And we can get in, there's things other that happen. And when you talk to the dad about, the dad's like, I'm staying out of it, and which was really sad. But I want to get into too is like the teasing.
Mm-hmm.
There's this form of teasing that his family would engage in, and then Jason would do it to you. But the teasing, they call it teasing, but it was actually a form of putting each other down, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. They say things in a way that it's like, oh, it's just a joke. It's lighthearted. Oh, I'm just teasing you. Like basically to say, don't don't have any feelings around this. Don't be sensitive. I can say whatever I want if I put it into a lighthearted tone. And it just became worse over time. But at initially, okay, they're making a joke. Okay, I won't take it so hard.
Yeah. And I remember that too. You're saying, okay, like I'm not going to take it so hard. I'm just going to kind of, well, in a way, you kind of have to turn off your feelings.
Mm,
That's
yeah.
the beginning of how you're trying to numb or just disassociate yourself. But you brought up this important point where you said, if the teasing makes you feel bad about yourself or hurts you, like it's not funny, you need to recognize that. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, absolutely. Because it's hard to know, is it teasing, is it a joke, am I being too sensitive? Right, that's what our cognitive brains are doing. But if we check in with our feelings, like, does this hurt? That's your answer.
Does this hurt? Yeah. Because if someone makes a joke at your expense and it hurts, then that's not a joke.
Right,
To me, that's a passive aggressive put down.
right. Yeah.
So and again, that's one of the warning signs, because with emotional abuse, it's like layer upon layer upon layer, these little things that just tick away at your self-esteem. And with your lives being so intermesh, there's no separation. So you don't in a way have something like a barometer to kind of check and be like, no, this isn't okay, because you just let things go and go, and you constantly compromise. And before you know it, you're moving to Las Vegas and you never wanted to move there.
I did not want to move there.
You don't want to move there, but
I'm a Seattle girl.
And tell me how long, okay, so you move in together after 2 months of dating, and how much time has went by between Las Vegas?
So let's see, we started dating in like July, and then we moved in together in September. And then end of October, we were told the office is shutting down. You need to decide. And if you're gonna go, then you need to be there by the 1st of the year. So it was,
Oh, that was so fast.
yeah.
That was so fast. Oh my gosh. And oh, Kate, I tell you, my heart just broke for you, because you were talking about how Jason was just 100% Vegas, Vegas.
Yeah.
Didn't want to listen to anything you had to say. And here you are trying to apply for jobs in Seattle, doing your darndest in 2009.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Jason is just playing video games, right?
Yeah. Yeah. He was just like, oh, I'm gonna get the job in Vegas. So I'm just gonna do that. I'm not gonna try others.
Yeah. And here you're trying so hard to stay in Seattle, and you finally, can you tell how you came about that compromise? Because see, being in Seattle, you love the Northwest, the greenery, your family, and then going to Vegas. I know you didn't like the desert. So what made you kind of decide to say, well, that's it, I guess I'm going to Vegas?
Well, I applied for a lot of jobs and I was not hearing back from any. And so that was, I mean, yeah, it was the end of 2009. That was what was happening. But I have wonderful family members here and friends. And like, had I needed to stay with someone until I could find a different job and just stay in Seattle, that could have been an option for me.
Yeah.
But I was so determined to stay in this relationship. I had found someone. I was like, okay, this is the relationship I want to be with. I am going to get married and buy a house and have kids. And this is how I do that. And I think I had just turned 26 when I had met him. So I was just like, this is what's important to me. How do I be a 26-year-old? I gotta check all these little boxes. And
Right.
yeah, I guess I finally said something like, well, if I can get a promotion, then I'll go. I
Yeah.
don't want to go for that same job that I had before. And I got a promotion, and he was like, great, we're going then. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Okay.
And you still waited. You waited that full week before you got back to them with you accepting the job, that promotion.
Yeah, I wanted to see if I had heard back from any of the probably 100 jobs I had applied for.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah.
But I think an important thing is that you were determined to make the relationship work, which isn't necessarily a bad thing per se, but I think it goes, I mean, again, just not knowing that maybe this was not the right person to be determined to make this relationship work with. But when you're so young, you don't know.
Right. And then also, I mean, I want to say back then, it was not that long ago, but we were not talking about domestic violence as much as we are now.
No.
right? So it's like partly that I'm young, I'm just gung-ho about life
And love.
and love, yes. And and just pushing forward, but also that I just did not know what these warning signs are. And that's why it's so important for me to like explain this and get this message out and do this through this book, because in the book you can read, here's what happened, and
Right.
it can totally fine on the surface, and then here's how it was not.
Right. And a lot of it too, it just in terms like, so I was in college in the 90s. And
Mm,
back then I felt like there's a lot of stigma with domestic violence. Um, and in the 20s, and so in my 20s, I was skinny. I was very skinny. And my abuser would constantly tell me that I was fat. And I
mm,
was probably like 115 pounds. I'm about 5'6", 115 pounds, 5'6". And he would tell me that I was fat.
oh,
And I would believe it. I would. So in a way, it was just this way of feeling so low about yourself, and just constantly rolling at your self-confidence and esteem. And what kind of finally took me to leaving him was that I had a really good male friend who would lift me up and would just tell me, why are you with that guy? He's such a loser, because he didn't really work, kind of mooshed off of me. And my friend just kept on building me up. And, I was getting more and more distance from him. And that's how I was finally be able to leave, because I had someone that was making me feel good about myself. But it took a really long time. Took 7 years off and on.
yeah, and that's fantastic you had that person. But another of the things that abusers do is isolation. They try and
Yeah.
take you away from all those people. So I maintained my Seattle friendships through living in Tacoma and Las Vegas, and I maintained my relationships with my family members. Um, but there was this emotional isolation that was also taking place, to where I was not telling them about all the things that was happening.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
Mostly because I think I would have been scared of the results if I had like gotten back to him.
Yeah.
Also because I was just so confused about what really was happening. I could really never quite make sense of it at the time.
Yes. Yes. And I think what's interesting, another sign of the selfishness, which you had mentioned, when you folks moved to Vegas, you basically packed up your whole entire apartment. I think you packed one box. I think you put two items inside, you said.
Right.
And he kept on, he was manipulating you, because you would say, we got to let's go, let's go. And he'd be like, no, let's relax, let's cuddle. And so what resulted was, he's so, in a way it's hard, because we know this needs to be done, but then yet here's someone we love saying, let's relax, let's cuddle, come hold me, let's watch a movie, spend time together. So then you say, okay, but then meanwhile, the packing is not getting done. And so it's a subtle form of manipulation, where then that's why you ended up doing yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely a form of manipulation of,
Yeah.
I'm showing you I want to be there with you. I want to spend time with you. I care about you on one hand, right? But then it's like the fact that you can't do anything to help.
Yeah.
We have a clear deadline of like, this is when we have to be there. This is when we have the moving trucks, how long it's going to take to drive there. Like, this is when we have to be out of our apartment. There's deadlines we have to hit that
Yeah.
I just ignore.
Yeah. If you care about me and care about us, then let's pack. That's what caring is. Partners help each other, because
Yeah.
after all too, he's the one that wanted to move to Vegas, so he should have been one to the majority of the packing.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And then you guys get to Vegas and you have to do all the unpacking, but you also mentioned too about his manipulation of his best friend,
Mhm.
Clint, who drove you to Vegas, and Jason and Clint were supposed to take turns. And when it was, no, maybe it wasn't Clint, maybe it was somebody else. It was somebody else, I think.
Manny.
Okay. And when it was Jason's turn, he said something along Manny to the line. He's like, wow, Manny, you're such a good driver, and you're doing such a fantastic job. And so basically it was a form of manipulating Manny to boost Manny up. And you even marked in your book, like how Manny's chest kind of puffed up and he kind of beamed. And so instead of Jason driving, Manny drove you guys 24 hours to Vegas,
Yes.
which was crazy.
Crazy. Yeah.
I feel so bad.
Yeah. Jason's manipulation made me feel like this is a sense of pride if you can do this.
Yeah. And I thought it was so sweet that you even offered, like, you're like, hey, Manny. And then Jason kind of shut you down and basically said, no, Manny's got this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, ooh. But again, it's not one thing, but it's all these little things that add up. And then we're gonna get to your wedding. And again, with your wedding too, like I read too that you basically kind of just did everything. And I think he complained, like, this is what it is. Hey babe, you do everything, right? And then when you pick something out, like the vases, I believe it was, and he's like, I wanted round vases. Who are you?
Right. Right. Yeah, he was just like, this is, he kind of framed it in a way like, oh, this is your special day. It's the bride's special day. You get to choose how you want it to be. And I'm like, great, but it's for us. It's our day. So like, I need your help on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's relax. Oh, not right now. Like, okay, well, we chose a venue. We have a date. Again, we have deadlines. We have to do things.
Yeah. And not only that too, Kate, it's just, I mean, what we're missing over is that you also did, like, even moving, you did all the research, the apartments, line everything up. You even compromised where you wanted to live, in what neighborhood you wanted to live. And that's, you're doing all the searching and you're doing all the legwork and all the footwork, and yet you have to compromise to where he wants to be. And with the wedding too, and so you're working, you talk about how you're working and you're doing all this wedding planning at night, and it takes so much time and effort and energy. And meanwhile, he's just playing his violent video games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then that's not it. You're such a go-getter.
Yeah. Yeah, I am. I get kind of set on something I want and then I just go. But I mean, now, a little later in life, I do take time to stop and reflect along the way about how things are going instead of blindly pushing through, and checking in with my feelings.
Yeah.
Like that's so important to
Yeah.
do, to realize, had I stopped and checked in, and I'm not blaming myself here, right? But like, had I stopped to check in with my feelings along the way, I would have had more indication about what was going on, perhaps.
And again, it's hard because when you're young and you're in love and you're determined and you have a life plan and a life goal, you just look over it because it'll work out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because again, and that's why it's tough because, and you mentioned too that you're an empath and a very empathetic person. So it's hard when, and it's always the empaths that that tend to be with these types of like emotional vampires, abusers, because they just kind of suck everything from us. And we're like, very positive and make it work and always looking for the best, always hoping for the best. But I'm going to talk about how on your wedding day itself, before the evening, you said you felt there were some signs there inside of you. There was something.
Yeah, I felt super, super anxious. Like, not quite a panic attack, but like on the verge of like, I just felt like a huge surge of anxiety right before I'm supposed to get married. And I don't know, like when you watch movies about people getting married and you see other people get married, you see that so much. So I thought like, oh, maybe it's common. Maybe it's normal to be anxious right before. And so again, it was a feeling that I dismissed.
So again, but there's a difference between like an excited anxiousness,
Yes.
nervous anxiousness, or was this like a dread type of anxiety?
Yeah, no, such a good point to bring up, because the physiological feelings we can feel in our bodies between anxiety and excitement are basically the same. It's elevated heart rate, it's our blood is pumping faster. But it's like what emotion comes with it, fear or joy. And Yeah, I think I was definitely sliding more toward fear.
You were not towards joy. That was for sure.
No, yeah, yeah, yeah,
You mentioned too that you couldn't, so when you had come down, I guess the stairs, and you couldn't see Jason's face in the crowd,
yeah,
which was interesting.
yeah. Because most of the time you can pick out your loved one from the crowd
Right.
quite immediately.
Yeah.
Um, but it was just like this whole big blur was kind of happening, and he was just in the sea of everybody. And I thought, well, that's weird that I didn't, like, someone had to point him out to me. Oh, he's over here. And I was like, oh,
Yeah. And by then it's too late. You're there, you go through with it, you just push it down, you dismiss it. And then the wedding night happens, and that was the first incident of physical abuse, right?
yeah.
Yeah. What happened?
Um, he was like, it's our wedding night, we have to have sex. And I was exhausted. We had been drinking too.
Of course you're exhausted because you're doing everything.
Yeah, I'm so tired. And I'm like, just barely able to like get this dress off. And I'm like, I can't, I have no energy. I don't have the energy to have sex. And he's like, you're my wife now. You have to do what I say. And I'm like, what? Like,
Yeah.
I my initial thought was, wait, are you, is this like you're teasing? Like you're not serious? Like, and then that's when he slapped me.
Yeah, and was interesting is that he's like, we have to consummate. And it's so old school, like, back in the days where you had to consummate the marriage on the wedding night. And that's what he was insisting you to do.
Yeah.
And then the fact that you're my wife, you have to do what I say. I'm like, what, are we in the 1500s? I don't know what happened. Did I step back in a time capsule? Because that's not how it happens. But there was, again, it was that selfishness, that no respect or consideration for your feelings. It's all about him and his needs.
Hmm.
Must satisfy my needs. And I think especially too when it comes to women and that whole power and dynamic over sex with with abusers, it's, you got to satisfy my physical needs. And then
Yeah.
to slap you on your wedding night because you're too tired. Yeah, that was a clear sign.
Right. But
But
the
go ahead.
anything about that was that I did not remember it happened until years later.
Yeah. Can you go into that? Was it because you're drunk? Is it?
I mean, sure, yeah, I was a little drunk, but no, I wouldn't say that's why. Because now I can remember it, very
Yeah.
clearly. But um it was such a shock
Yeah.
to my system after we get married. It's supposed to be our happiest day of our lives together. And
Yeah.
I was just so shocked. And then I was like, I'm so tired. I need to go to bed. I can't do anything. I can't think. I don't know. What do I say and do? I'm
Mhm.
just gonna fall right asleep. And then the next day it was kind of like there's an apology and we're supposed to get on the plane to go to our honeymoon. And so I just like let it be. I was like, we'll figure it out later. And I just pushed it to the back of my mind. And part of that is the way our brains protect ourselves.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Self-protection to, okay, if we don't remember something big and scary, then we can move on with our lives.
Yeah.
But at any point, I could have stopped everything, right? I was in Seattle for the wedding. I could have, I'm going to stay here, right? I could have changed my mind at any point. But when you get so wrapped into things
You
and
can't.
so wrapped into like this person, and also just, I was just so confused. Like, how could he have done this? Doesn't seem like him. It'll probably never happen again.
Again, it was a one type of thing. It was a mistake. He was probably just tired, stressed. You even said too, I should have just given in.
I mean, at that moment, sure.
Like,
Why don't you think of all the options that would have made you stay safer?
Yeah, I mean, because you kind of think, well, it was my fault a
Yeah.
little, a little bit, but I totally hear what you're saying in terms of, um, you're just in such a shock. And then again, to protect yourself, your brain has to disassociate from the event because
Mhm.
it's just too traumatic and hurtful and painful. I remember, oh gosh. Oh, I remember there's this one time where my boyfriend at the time, we were driving, I was driving, we were driving on the freeway, we're in an argument, and he punched me. He punched me like right in my face, in my eye, and I had a black eye. And for one thing, just being shocked, like, oh my gosh, I'm driving on the freeway, and then to get punched, like a lot of times the relationship was, it's very verbally abusive. Um, uh, I wouldn't say it was physical abuse, but it probably was a lot, just kind of like holding me down, grabbing my arms, a lot of pushing, using physical force on me. But to actually get hit and punched. And in fact, there's a part of me right now that still kind of disassociates myself from that. And I can't believe that it happened. And I can't believe I stayed with him after that. And you just like, that was a mistake. That's not going to happen again. That was just a one-time type of thing. And I think I just felt so much shame too about letting that happen.
Yeah.
Just even yeah, it's tough. Like I said, even it's so tough right now to even think about it because I don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Right.
mean, I think I felt just a tiny bit of dissociation even just now, like going over that night, because I'm putting myself back in there
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
protecting myself and doing so. And the shame is a really important aspect too, right? Like I had brought all my friends and family to the wedding, right? Like everybody was there. Had I made the decision to change my mind at any point, they would have supported me. They're my friends and family. But, when you look at collectively all these people that have made this sacrifice to be there, it would have been a whole bunch of shame and guilt. And even after I left him and like thought about like, oh my gosh, everybody came to be to this wedding to celebrate love. And I guess it wasn't love. I still like had some initial thoughts of like, oh, I feel bad about that.
Mm. But that's why I think these books are so important because it's just we have to normalize this experience and what we've gone through to erase that shame and guilt because
Yeah.
it's such a heavy burden for the survivors to carry. Um, and that's why it's just, and just to me, for even you to write these books takes so much strength because for me there's just so much disassociation, and for you to kind of go back there and relive it and be in those moments is so powerful. And thank you for doing that. Thank you for bringing this to everyone's attention and trying to engage in this conversation, so people who are going through this situation can see, oh my gosh, that's me, that's me. And it's okay, it's okay for me, um, to say, to kind of just say, like, to stand up for myself and be like, hey, what I'm feeling inside is right. This isn't right how you're treating me. So moving forward, and I get it, right? So it's, you're going to go on your honeymoon. You guys are going to go to, you guys went to the Caribbean, right?
Yeah.
St. Martin's or something.
Yeah. St. Martin. Yeah. It was beautiful. I mean, so then we just had a great time on our honeymoon for the most part. Like it was wonderful.
Yeah, you folks have a wonderful honeymoon, lots of great memories. You go to Vegas. You folks start off on this new life together, and everything is going good. And what I want to jump to, and I think this is another telling sign of selfishness and the compromises that you folks have to make. I think it was was it your first wedding anniversary where you wanted to go on a trip to celebrate?
Mm.
And so you, oh my gosh, you poor, it's just, but I can see it because I'm like, yeah, that's what we do. We always compromise. Where you had wanted to go on a trip, I believe, to the East Coast, but it was too expensive.
Yeah. And I don't know that time if we were talking about the anniversary or not, but I
Yeah,
just
it was an
wanted to go. Yeah. I just wanted to like go on a trip together. It's like when we were on our honeymoon, everything was great. And so let's go have that experience again. But also I was just like, okay, like I'm working, I'm in a marriage, like I'm bored, like I need some adventure.
Right.
Um, and so I'm like, let's plan this trip. Maybe we can go here. Let's look at different cities that we could fly to just go see or to drive to. And eventually it was like, oh, we're just gonna walk along the Las Vegas Strip. Okay, great.
Yeah,
Things
but that was,
have been like forever.
but the thing is that you were constantly compromising. Like, the first thing was let's fly somewhere. And then it was expensive. So you said, okay, so then you looked into states where you folks could drive. I believe
Mhm.
you said Arizona. I believe you said Utah. And then,
Yeah, New Mexico is all right there from Vegas. Yeah.
and he didn't want to go to Arizona because you had family there.
Yeah.
So, and he didn't want to see them or something.
I was just like, I don't know, sounds boring. We haven't like I was just dismissive. Yeah. A family in California as well. He's just like, no, I don't know. We've done that. Boring. Like, I don't know.
And
Maintain
then,
isolation, I guess.
yeah, isolation. But Arizona has a Grand Canyon. It's like, how's that boring?
We did eventually get to the Grand Canyon. But
But here you are, you're just throwing ideas after ideas, and then you just end up going to the strip and checking out the casinos,
yeah,
the different casinos. And it's
which
like,
we had already been to so many times.
but that was Jason's thing.
Yeah.
That was what Jason wanted to do. And you had mentioned too, like in a way, Jason was happy doing the same thing, going to dive bars, going to casinos, hanging out the same group of friends. And that wasn't your thing, but you compromised because it was Jason's.
Yeah.
And the strip.
Him happy, then the happier that he would be, or happier, then the happier that I would be, because there wouldn't be as much emotional abuse if he was feeling happier, right? So it was also a self-protective.
Right. Right. And you mentioned this term called fawning.
Yes.
Can you go into that?
Yeah. So a lot of people have heard of freeze or flight, or flight or freeze, which are our body's natural reactions. We get a flood of cortisol. Something is telling us we're in danger for whatever reason, and we're either going to stop and not know how to react, or like go into like a bear in the woods, like you play dead, like freeze, or you fight, fright, or freeze, sorry, or you run away,
Mhm.
or you fight the bear, or in emotional abuse, we add fawning, which is a way of like, I'm going to give you compliments and I'm going to say nice things to you. I'm going to compromise and do whatever you want to do. And that is my way of fighting, but not running away. It's that other response to, it's the people pleasing.
People pleasing. Okay. Which is what survivors do in an abusive relationship, but it's like we have to do it to protect ourselves and keep ourselves safe.
Exactly.
Yeah. But we don't even realize it. That's why.
No, right. It just becomes so part of like, oh, like you will be happier if I do what you want to do. Okay. And then it's just so ingrained, it's just part of daily life.
Yeah. And that's what it's so subtle. And you also talked to about gaslighting.
Yeah.
Can you define what that is? And then are you able to give an example in your relationship with Jason?
Yeah. So in gaslighting, there's it's basically the survivor says X happened, and the abuser says, no, it didn't. And the survivor is like, look, like I saw the sunrise today, the sun rose, the sun is in the sky. And the gaslighter is like, no, there's no sun. No, never will be a sun. I only see a moon.
Yeah.
And they just continue the pattern, the cycle of that conversation to the point where it's like, okay, fine. I guess, if you keep talking about it all day, I don't see a sun anymore either.
Yeah. And it's a way to not only, well, it's a way to dismiss your feelings, your belief, and basically control the narrative.
Yeah. Control the narrative and to like, it's another form of manipulation and emotional abuse to say what I believe happened and what you believe happened did not happen. And it's most often used in response. I think it's used a lot throughout, but it's just like not, I don't know, I didn't notice it, right? But it's used to say, no, I didn't hurt you. No, I did not do this. And so there is a time in the you said you're like at the halfway in the third book. So there's an incident that's you're about to read about in the third book, where he pushes me downstairs
Oh, okay.
and he denies it happens.
Wow.
Yeah.
He just completely denies it.
Yeah. It happens overnight. And then the next morning in multiple conversations, he just denied it happened at all.
Oh yeah, that's a good example of gaslighting. And then let's get into trauma bonding. You mentioned this, oh gosh, I think it's in the second book. And I don't remember if this is a time where maybe this was a time that you guys, I think you guys were talking about politics or the healthcare. Jason and his dad cornered you and you were trying to leave. And then Jason was, oh gosh, he took your phone, he took your car keys, you were in the bathroom. You tried to run out. He was telling you don't leave. He was running after you. And did he slap you again? He slapped you at that time.
So there was the time that we had the conversation, the argument about healthcare, and I felt cornered and I ran out. And then there was another time. So then at the other time, he, I presume, was feeling emasculated.
The shirt incident.
Yes.
It was after the Seahawks game. He had been drinking with his dad. You had made plans to see that burlesque show in Vegas. You had bought him a nice shirt, which I thought was very thoughtful and very sweet of you. You guys were meeting, you brought him the shirt, and he felt emasculated by the fact you bought him a shirt.
Right. Which still, yeah, makes no sense.
Makes no sense. That was a very thoughtful thing for you to do. And not only that, you had bought like his original shirt, and then you had gone out and do something very nice. And at this time too, you had gotten promoted again.
Mm-hmm.
You were making more money than Jason.
Mm-hmm.
So Jason felt emasculated by the fact that you got promoted, you were making more money, and then you bought him the shirt. And so can you talk us through about what happened and what eventually led to that second act of physical violence?
Yeah, so he like is very upset about this shirt, and he, I think, eventually puts it on or doesn't put it on. I actually don't remember.
I don't remember.
Whatever I wrote in the book is what happened. But and then we go to the show and he just like, I don't know, still is angry with me. Like there's just nothing's making any sense about why he's angry with me. Like there's nothing I say can like elicit a good reaction, even though we're at this like really amazing, incredible show. And then like driving home, it just felt very like silence. And then we get home and I actually don't remember the exact, like, I mean, yeah, I guess there is a part of dissociating even in like writing the book, right? And so I'm like, exactly what happened? I'm not sure. But yeah, he swears at me and calls me names, and he slaps me, and
In front of his dad?
in front of the dad, yeah, who does nothing.
Yeah.
And at this point, I'm like, okay, what? Like, I don't want to be here. I don't feel safe being here. And so I try and grab like some things to go. Clothes, like contact solution, toothbrush, like just some things I need. And my laptop, because I felt like, oh, if you're in danger and all your, what are you going to save in a time of danger? And I was like, I had so many pictures on there. And so I wanted to save save my laptop. And so I'm packing this bag and he is trying to stop me from leaving. I want to pause and say to anybody that's ever in a relationship, or just in general, I think it's helpful to have, but if you're in a relationship that you think something could happen, have a go bag ready. But also, like, an earthquake could happen at any time, right? So like just have a go bag ready of like just the basic things that you would need to like go on a trip or go somewhere for a couple of days. Having copies of your IDs, passports, any like medical prescriptions, copies of keys that are hidden.
Wow. Mhm.
I think that's a really important thing to have ready to go.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he tried to take my keys from me and my phone from me, and
And he was holding your phone and he's much taller than you. You're trying to jump and get at it and he couldn't.
yeah,
He also threatened to stomp on your laptop, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, he was literally doing anything he could to prevent me from leaving, and it was terrifying. And so I like ended up digging my nails into him to get him to let go of me. And I run out the door into a neighbor's house, and I don't have my phone or my keys. So I
Mhm.
can't go anywhere. But I go to the neighbor's house and I asked them if I could use their computer, and I got on Facebook Messenger and I messaged my neighbors or my friends who lived not that far away, and they came and met me and I stayed with them.
Nice neighbors.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think what was hard too is that these friends were mutual friends of yours. And when you told them what happened, the woman basically said, well, you emasculated him.
Yeah.
So, and that's the hard part is that you don't have, in a way, you have a sounding board that's basically saying, well, it's your fault.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I felt like if I was going to talk to anyone, I was going to talk to somebody who's in our mutual friend group who knew him and would know both sides. I felt like if I talked to, I think that's another thing. If I talked to my family about it, I knew that the second I talked to my family about it, I would be pulled to leave, but I
Yeah.
wasn't ready for that. So I just talked to people that knew him just to like, yeah, soundboard off of them, and only to be met with like, oh, stay, you need to be there for him through these tough times that he's dealing with his anger.
Yeah. And that's the tough part right there.
Yeah.
You need to stay with him and support him.
Yeah. And I think an aspect of that is that many of my friends in Las Vegas were Latina, and there's that cultural aspect of this is
Yeah.
how it is in our family, and this is how it's been for us. And so this is what you should do. I
No,
don't know saying like that's all people or anything, right? But there's just cultural aspects to be aware of.
yeah. And it makes, so when you're talking about how you didn't want to tell your family, it makes, so with my, with my first boyfriend, my mom, my mom hated him so much. Well, she disapproved of him. So she said, you can't bring him around our family events. So in a way that was kind of isolating because, it was just me hanging out with him and his family. And I couldn't talk to my mom about it because my mom was tired of hearing it.
Mm,
So I was really trapped because there wasn't anyone I could talk to about it and talk about how I was feeling, except for, maybe friends, and friends would tell me to leave, but it's different when it's your peers. And, at the time too, I was so stubborn that even if my mom had told me to leave, I wouldn't because she was telling me. But in a way, it was hard because I was so isolated, and I didn't have my own sounding board to basically tell me this was not okay. And then I was too ashamed to talk to my family about it. I think the only person that really knew how bad it was, maybe even she didn't know, was my sister. We're a year and a half apart, but like everybody couldn't stand him because everybody knew how he treated me. And so in a way that becomes isolating in itself too, where I think you talk about this too when you're saying, the friends and the family members, it really takes this, it really takes this understanding to not be judgmental and to just be there.
Yes.
and just provide support.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually not that uncommon for friends and family members to say, no, I'm tired of hearing about this person, leave or stop talking. And I think that they're trying to be helpful, but I think they're also annoyed because hearing about it is hurting them.
Right.
But if we can get that message out to like be supportive, listen, be non-judgmental, understand it takes time to leave it, understand it takes time to untangle the trauma bonds and the codependency,
Yeah.
to untangle the lies of the gaslighting, um, to and when things have been so tangled and there's so much dissociation, there's even greater separation between your mind and your body. So it's like you have to do all this untangling and then put yourself back together. And then you might start understanding what's happening.
And that doesn't happen overnight, people.
No. And so our friends and family can help us by talking through this. And yeah, I just really want to highlight, like, if you're telling a person like it's time to leave and they don't listen to you and you're worried you're going to like lose your friend over suggesting them like, oh, I'm not going to have this friendship anymore. Right. But like if they stay in these relationships, they can literally be killed and then you don't have a friend anymore. So it's important to keep in mind, you want to put the friends, the human, above the friendship.
Hmm. You want to put the human above the friendship. Yeah. And you say this in your third book. You say, be gentle with yourself and any survivors you know. The process takes time. And
Yeah.
it does takes time. And again, as a friend, it's just, we're just asking people that even though we know you're tired of hearing about that, it's so important for the friend to continue knowing that you're there as support. Because if you shut yourself off and you say, I don't want to hear anymore, that's actually going to isolate the survivor even more.
Absolutely. And especially when it's to that point too, because then if you talk to a new friend who you haven't, not a new friend necessarily, it could be a new friend, but a person you have not told any of the story to before about what's going on, you have to start over telling them, okay, well, this is what's been happening all the way through, which is way harder to do than to continue talking with somebody that already knows what's going on at least a little bit.
And so let's go into the trauma bond, because when you come back after, after the slap, you mentioned that, Jason had his arms outstretched and it was like blocking their doorway. So you couldn't, like, he was forcing you to have this intimate connection again.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's no way for me to get in through the door without hugging him, which I certainly was not inclined to do after he had hit me. So it's another form of manipulation. And as we bond with people we love, we have that hormone of oxytocin, and then it gets conflated in a trauma bond. The oxytocin of love hormone is getting conflated with the stress hormone cortisol, and then it's so intertwined that you almost expect them to be together. Like, should I have stress and love together?
Stress and love together.
Like, is that how it's supposed to be? But you're just so, I don't know, you still feel like love with this person and you're codependent, the lives are intermingled. I mean, by this point, we're married. We've been in Las Vegas for a couple, I don't know, 3 or 4 years at this point. I guess 4 years probably. We have all the same friends. We still work at the same workplace. Like, there's not much separate identity happening for myself.
No, you had no identity because you had no friends in Vegas except for your work friends.
Yeah, I mean, and our mutual friends.
Yeah, and you did everything that Jason wanted to do. You didn't have your own separate interests or hobbies.
Yeah, I eventually do start like branching out to that in the third book a bit more, which is helpful, right? I start learning how to garden and like going to these like weekly like gardening classes and I don't know, actually, maybe is that the only hobby? I don't know. I think it's like, oh, I started doing yoga. Like I met this great yoga instructor. I was like trying to do other things to like make myself feel good because I couldn't understand why I wasn't feeling good, why I was constantly feeling stressed and constantly having headaches and had gained a bunch of weight. Like I just, none of it made sense to me. So that was my branching out to my own hobbies to try and find nature and yoga, which are fantastic,
Yeah.
but did not explain, did not heal.
So in terms of the trauma bond, one thing you had mentioned in the books is where it's almost as if like this, your brain is releasing oxycontin or such. And then you mentioned like it almost becomes like an addiction, this feeling.
Um, yeah. So yes, and it's funny you said Oxycontin, which is the drug, right? But you're talking about addiction, so it's appropriate. So oxytocin.
Oxytocin. Okay.
Yes. And that's the same love hormone that is released when mothers give birth and they have all these feelings of, oh, I have all this love for this child. And also it's soothing the pain of the childbirth.
Yeah.
And then the oxytocin is flooded again through nursing or even feeding without the nursing, right? There's still oxytocin. And then through hugs and kisses and sex in a romantic partnership or even non-romantic partnership, but all the ways that we show physical affection for one another is flooding our brains with oxytocin, which is keeping us connected. Now, in a healthy relationship, you will still have oxytocin, you'll have love and feel love when you're being affectionate with your partner. But you can separate and you can have your own lives, and you can know that if something happened, if for some reason something happened to my partner or to our relationship, I would still survive. But when you're in a trauma bond, you have this feeling of, I absolutely need them to survive.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I get you. Gosh, it was so just kind of when I think back in terms of the violent incidences that would happen between us and with getting the pushing and the shoving and things like that. And then the makeup afterwards, the I'm sorry, it's so intense.
Mm.
It's just, and you just crave it. Yeah, you just crave it so bad. And you just, in a way, I'm like, I guess this is what love is like, where you have these intense highs and lows, but like you said, it's love mixed with stress and pain. And that's not what love is.
It's not what love is. And then love does not have high, intense highs and lows. I mean, there's going to be some things that happen, right? But like, no, love does not feel like a roller coaster. But yeah, and each time that we have these intense lows and then we make up and we have these intense highs, that's strengthening that trauma bond.
Yeah. And you get, it's like in my head, it's like I get addicted to that. Like I'm constantly sinking that, like, because when it's bad, your brain just latches on to the good times, the fun times.
For safety.
Yeah. But it's hard too, because there is a pattern. It's just always up and down. Like you said, it's a circle. So let's get into it. It happened. So this is another thing, and it goes back into the warning signs of the parental relationship, where you had mentioned that. So at this time, the dad had moved up to Vegas too for work. And one of the things that the dad always called the wife back here in Seattle to, can I getting the wife's permission to go out and do something. And when Jason asked you for your permission, you're like, just go. You don't need my permission. But it was interesting because you mentioned that was a kind of a sign of codependency, where he kind of had to ask his wife every time to go out. But then it kind of goes into, so it goes into when his father witnessed the slap. And then later on, you asked to talk to him about it, but then he said, that's between you and him. I'm not going to get involved.
Yeah.
And it was shocking because part of you like, and I was, and I was hoping too that the dad would say, hey, Jason, you can't do that. You can't do that to your wife. But so it's so hard. You have these friends, these mutual friends, basically saying you emasculated him. You got to support him. And then you've got a dad basically condoning the behavior as well.
Mm-hmm.
So even more so, I can see how that just, like, how are you supposed to get out? Because it's just getting reinforced.
Right.
That
Everyone's telling me everything's, oh, this is kind of okay. Right.
Mhm.
Like people are normalizing this
Yeah.
behavior. Whereas if I called my family and told them about this, it would absolutely not be normalized.
Yeah. Yeah. And but part of you don't want it again. So the reason why you don't want to tell your family is shame,
Yeah.
guilt, embarrassment, and also you're not ready. You don't want to hear your family tell them to leave because you're not strong enough to leave.
Yes.
You just
Yeah. His emotional abuse had definitely taken quite the toll on my self-confidence, which I was a pretty confident person before, and I am now. But with the emotional abuse, like the self-confidence withers down so much, but then there's so there's lack of self-esteem and feeling like inner strength to be able to make these decisions.
yeah.
Shame and guilt around like, oh, I guess I was wrong. I made the wrong decision about this person. Like when or the way that he's making it feel in my head too is shame and guilt about not being strong enough to stay and make it work. You
Oh,
promised to stay married, you should stay with me.
yeah.
And what
And
is the sanctity of marriage? Which I don't know why I felt like so, but I mean, his emotional abuse, his ways of manipulating me, I felt like, okay, we preserve the sanctity of marriage, even though my parents are divorced and remarried and so happy and their new 20 plus years each marriages. So I knew that divorce was an option, but I was just so in his manipulation.
yeah, and we want to tell women out there, I mean, screw the sanctity of marriage. If you're in an abusive relationship, get the hell out.
Yeah. Yes.
Don't worry about the sanctity of marriage and what society would think of you. No.
No, worry about you and your own emotional, mental health and physical health and safety.
Are so much more important than a failed marriage. And don't think about it as a failed marriage at all.
Right.
Men, and this goes for men too, are in abusive relationships.
Yeah.
All we can do is just learn and grow. But yeah, I get that too. The sanctity of marriage, the societal pressure,
Mm.
BS.
Right.
So we're gonna jump into, oh gosh, due to time constraints, we gotta jump. There's a really bad incident that happened at I believe it was after the Seahawks playoff game, or the 49ers game, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Classic historical game, kind of.
That awesome game. Was that back in 2014, 2015?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like such a good game and such a wonderful night. And yet this horrible, terrible thing happened where
Yeah.
Jason, and it wasn't against you, it was against you. You had gone to bed and Jason and a woman, one of your friends, was downstairs talking, and you got woken up with your friends screaming, Kate, help me, help me. And then you go down and you see Jason, she's on the stairs, and Jason is just towering over her, just punching her in the face repeatedly.
Yeah.
And so you call the police, you guys leave, you get to safety. And I'm going to fast forward a little bit, but a conversation happens with Jason where you had said you had punched her. Okay, first of all, Jason was mad because you called the police, and he's like, you're my wife. How could you call the police? Well, I didn't. You were punching her repeatedly 13 times, she said. 13 times. I don't even know how this poor woman. And Jason gets pressed with charges. And then you mentioned how he had some scratches on his hands. And first he didn't remember at all, right? He says, I don't remember. Then he saw the scratches and cuts on his hands, and he goes, oh, now I remember. She hit me with a beer bottle. C was self-defense. And you had mentioned to Jason, well, weren't you holding her phone or the garbage disposal, threatening to drop it in? And he said, yeah, but it was self-defense. See, and so you guys were having this argument where you're like, that doesn't warrant you punching her in the face 13 times. And it's just so interesting because, and again, this is how like, it's just, and you talk about he had no remorse, no empathy whatsoever. And he just kind of persisted in this narrative. Well, I was justified and was self-defense. And, that was horrible. It's a heavy moment. And it's just, there's no human being deserves getting punched in the face 13 times unless someone has your children and you've got to intervene because imminent harm is going to come to a child or a family member. But it wasn't. He was just drunk. He was just angry. He was just an asshole.
Yeah, he is an asshole. Yeah. Yes. And I do want to just clarify one part because it's important for safety. I got my friend out of the situation and then I called the police.
Oh,
So, yeah, I just want to like putting safety out there, get the person out of the situation. So we ran like 2 blocks down the road and then I called the police from there.
no, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, police came and made sure that got her like the medical attention she needed, which thankfully was not serious. Like it obviously was serious, but like she didn't have to go to the hospital that night, I guess. And the police came and intervened. And going back to like us watching all the same TV shows, like we watched Law and Order SUV like every night it was on. Just a lot of nights. I don't know, maybe just the new ones, but anyways, and we'd have discussions watching that show where he would sometimes be victim blaming and
Victim blaming.
yeah, and he would talk about like and sometimes in those kinds of cop shows, the other shows we watched too, I had cops in it. He would talk about like, oh, the wife has like confidential protection. You can just say like, I'm the wife, I'm not gonna say anything. And we just had so many conversations about that regarding TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
and then conversations about like not telling my family about when he had hit me.
Yeah.
In the moment I was just like, okay, I'm invoking husband wife privilege, I'm not saying anything. It felt like the right response.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it was the response that kept me alive. I don't know that.
It's really interesting too, because when you said that response, I'm like, how does she know that? But after watching Law and Order SUV, no, I get it too. I feel like you had to do that. Your brain has to do that too, to protect yourself, especially after seeing something so horrible. And frankly, I was impressed that you called the cops because that was big of you, because you don't know what type of retaliation that would have led to.
No, I did not.
So that was a big moment. That was strong. And you had stayed away, but yet when you went back to the house, and again, he did the same thing, right? Where he had his arms outstretched, forcing you to have this intimacy again.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about how you felt?
Tired.
Tired.
That was the biggest, like, just depleted, just confused, emotionally worn the F down, like just gone at that point. I think what prompted me to call the police was that he was hurting my friend who was not hurting me. And so what prompted my protective qualities, I guess, or protective behaviors were to protect my friend.
Yeah.
And so after that had happened, and I stayed with my friend that night. I went home and was like, I guess I need to go home. I don't know. I was just so confused.
Mm-hmm.
And all of his emotional abuse and witnessing the physical abuse, all of his manipulation, I just didn't know what was going on. And so I started being able to find my voice a little bit at that point and trying try and make some sense from him. Like, very, very rare would there be just basically the only explanation that you had to where somebody would punch somebody. But I was just like, there's no excuse. Like, why? And I'm starting to see through him at this point, but I still was so wrapped up in his stuff.
Yeah. Well, like you said, it's a process. It takes time. And again, you're just around people that just normalize this behavior. Because I think even after this incident, didn't his friend came over, you told the friend, and didn't his friend just kind of shrug?
Yeah, a friend from home, so from out of town from Vegas, had come over, and like months later,
Mhm.
after that happened, and Jason was able to talk to his friend about it, and his friend like didn't seem surprised.
Yeah. Ooh, which is something in itself.
Yeah.
Surprised. And then didn't you have some other friends that basically said you need to support him through this court case?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. That was like our closest couple friends. We had like this set of different couples that we were friends with. That yeah, they said to support him and be there for him. And what if he goes to jail? And what happens to your house? Like, those aren't the questions to be asking.
Yeah, you kept on saying, your friend's name was Mary. Well, what about Mary? What, like, nobody seemed to care about Mary.
Yeah,
It was all about Jason.
yeah, right.
So again, it's so you have to be, you really have to be kind to yourself because everybody else was just normalizing his behavior. And you even mentioned too in the book that you had said it was our case. It wasn't even his case, it was our case.
I felt like I was part of the legal case.
Which just shows how just that level of just intertwinedness, enmeshment, codependency to say it was our case.
Yeah.
And so then you guys go to court, he kind of just gets nothing, just gets a slap on the wrist. And then you wrote down, he said, let's go out and celebrate. And you're like, celebrate for what? And he goes, I didn't go to jail. All I had to do is pay fines and I have the money to pay the fines. I want to go celebrate. Ah,
So gross.
you're like,
So gross.
yeah. And even Child's like, oh my, okay. But in a way too, though, I could, oh my gosh, just kind of being stuck in there. Okay, so I remember in one incident with my abuser, there was a court case, and the prosecutors tried contacting me, and of course I just completely flaked out. Oh my gosh, I don't even know how the police got called to that one incident. I don't even remember what happened. I completely disassociated myself. Whoa. But and it just came back to me right now about this. So I didn't show up. The case ended up getting dismissed. And I think I remember when we got the news that it was dismissed, I just remember feeling so relieved,
Yeah.
excited. So kudos to you, because when you're so enmeshed like that, I maybe would have celebrated him not going to jail. Oh gosh. So I love the fact that you said, like, no, I'm not celebrating this.
No, yeah, absolutely not. I'm going to watch cartoons, which I almost never did. I was like very much retreating to a younger version of myself that I knew needed some nourishing and care.
Yeah. So I mean, I thought that was so, it's like, oh, there she is. She's getting a little bit of herself back. As hard as it is. But oh gosh, you had talked about too, I think before the court case, you had gotten sick and it was either 2 or 3 weeks that you're really dizzy and you saw a doctor, you saw an ENT, and no one can tell you why you're dizzy.
Yeah.
You go into that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the symptoms were somewhere between cold and flu symptoms, right? Like something along the lines, but I also just felt like the world was spinning. I couldn't have I couldn't stand up on my own. And like, to pause here with these terms that we also like use colloquially, the world was spinning. I literally felt dizzy, but like my world was spinning. I was like, I can't make sense of my world anymore. I don't know what's happening. This is not feeling safe and I don't know what to do. But there's all those enmeshments. Like figuratively, my world was spinning. Physically, I was feeling dizzy. And then feeling that I couldn't stand up because I was not standing up on my own 2 feet, figuratively or physically. So I went to different doctors and tried to figure out what was going on. And they did not ask if I was being abused.
Mhm. Yeah.
It has been recommended by the WHO, the World Health Organization, that doctors screen for this. Their recommendations are to screen people who are basically like childbearing age women. I think everybody should be screened for it regardless. Doesn't matter if you're childbearing age. But yeah, there's recommendations for doctors to be screening for this, just like to be screening for anxiety. Like I think Biden said like last year, every doctor should be screening for anxiety. And depression. These things should be screened for. When I went to 3 doctors asking for help, that could have been a time I got help.
Yeah. They could have given you some resources you had mentioned if somebody had just asked.
Yeah.
And so it kind of goes into like, so your body is reacting physiologically to the stress that you're under.
Yeah.
You had talked about that you were gaining weight. You just said it earlier, constant feeling stress, and you were drinking a bottle of wine a night to help cope with that. Can you explain? Can you go into that a little bit? How your body was, what you're experiencing?
Yeah. So as we were talking about earlier in the beginning of the story, in the beginning of this podcast earlier, of being able to connect with your body, and like had I been able to have a connection to my body at that time more, than I would have been able to listen to gut instincts and to feelings and paying attention to these jokes that were actually like quite harmful put downs.
Put downs.
Yeah. And so over time, the more and more emotional abuse I was enduring, and like confusion that comes along with the manipulation and the gaslighting of the emotional abuse,
Yeah.
the more and more I dissociated from my body. And then I believe that my body responded, "You are sick, something's wrong," which I believe it does. I believe our bodies will slow us down when we need to try and reestablish getting back in balance. And yeah, I couldn't quite put it all together at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that I was starting to put things together, the more it was like very confusing and hard to come to terms with. So drink more and don't make sense of it and forget it all.
Forget it all. Right. Let's not feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about how you're finally able to leave.
Yeah. Well, I had planned this trip with my cousins and my sister and her husband. We were going to go to Arizona. And prior to this trip, I started thinking maybe I need to talk to my sister. And if I don't say something to my sister, she's going to know something anyways. She and I are very close. She's one of my best friends in life. Like, she'll know something's up.
Yeah, she could just look at you and know.
Yeah. So I'm like, I probably should say something to her, but I don't know that I'm ready. Right. And so I had this really close, amazing friend. We're not as close with now, but we're still friends. But I talk with her almost every day because we work together, and then we just became like super close friends because of that. Anyway, so we're talking, and I asked her for advice on whether or not I should tell my sister. And she used beautiful, non-judgmental listening, did not make any decisions for me, let me come to terms myself that I should probably tell my sister.
And you had to tell her the whole story, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, the whole story.
Yeah.
So I told her the whole story, and then the next day we're all like, the four of us, me, Jason, my sister, and her husband are gonna go drive to Arizona and see our cousin. And that was when he pushed me down the stairs. And my cousin and my sister protected me, staying with me, and my brother-in-law protected me by staying with Jason and keeping him apart.
Wow.
And we ended up driving back to Vegas. Like, our house was there. My sister and her husband had their plane tickets booked out of Vegas. We had to get back. And all along the way, like, my sister's kind of, are you like, do you want to be with them? And I'm like, I just don't know. I don't know. And then we get back to Vegas, and I am like, what the hell? You pushed me down the stairs.
Yeah.
And he's saying he didn't. And so I explained to my sister, like, he says he didn't. And she's like, that's gaslighting. And I'm like, what's gaslighting?
Oh.
Yeah. So she explains that, and she's like, it's probably been happening this whole time. You probably just didn't know because of how coverted it can be.
It is.
And my sister and I and my sister's husband, we devised a plan to get me on a plane with them to Seattle after that. And I left.
Wow. And how did Jason react to you leaving?
There's so much detail in here. I'm like, okay. But he basically, I sent him a text saying, this is where we shared a car. So I sent him a text saying, this is where your car is parked at the office. And he had his key. And I just said, I'm going to be like going. I'm going home for a little while, and I'm not sure how long I'll be there. I just need to figure things out, because I also did not know that I was leaving him permanently at that point.
Okay.
I think my sister's goal, rightly so, was like, get away from him long enough to think about what the heck has been happening. Right. Yeah, and then I from the airport called his mom to try to tell his mom about all the awful things that her son had been doing, so she could maybe talk some sense into it. And she yelled at me and was like, I've known these things, don't come between me and my family. And
whoa.
Yeah. And I heard from him when he asked me where, like, the information about the home warranty was, like, a couple weeks, like maybe a week after I'd been there, less than that. He just texted, and I was like, it's on the side of the fridge, there's a magnet. Like, and the next I heard from him was being served with divorce papers.
So you were lucky.
Yes.
Yeah, he didn't try and come back and try and woo you back with his grand gestures and promises. I'm going to change, I promise.
No.
So
we had been through all of that, through, like, every time something had happened, right? It was, I'm going to change and da-da-da. Although I think, I mean, for one, like, I'm in a different state. Like, I flew home to Seattle from Las Vegas. Yeah. But I think also, once I talked to his mom, maybe that also put the nail in the coffin, so to say. Maybe the mom was like, look, don't talk to her anymore. This is what she called and said. Maybe it ended up being more helpful than I realized.
Yeah. And I think, and again, just being around your family and being protected and safe, and then those people kind of lifting you up and being like, no, it's not okay. Because again, like you're talking about, you're just so enmeshed, you're so entangled. It's almost as if like your judgment becomes so skewed that you don't know between good and bad, right and wrong, and in terms of how you should be treated.
Yes.
And it takes so much time. And you had gone through, and what made you start going to a support group for domestic violence survivors? How did that happen?
So my friend, the first friend that I called to actually like talk about, like, should I talk with my sister? This friend kept telling me to call the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And I was like, I don't know, is it domestic violence? Like, that's how little I knew. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Um, and my friend was like, please call them, please call them. Like, just like every few days, have you called them yet? You know, she would text me, email me, like, please, like, even if you don't know if it's domestic violence, like, they can help you figure that out.
What a good friend. What a good
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. This friend had actually been doing volunteer training for DV. So she was learning about this. Coincidentally, the timing, right? Like the timing was just she's learning about this
Whoa.
and I'm going through it.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So just
Very karmic.
yes. So I eventually call the hotline and I tell them what happened, like in just a few sentences. And they say, yeah, that is domestic violence. And I'm like, but I don't understand what to do. Like, how can I ever talk to him again? And this was what was so helpful. They said,
What did they say?
you don't ever have to talk to him again if you don't want to. And I was like, how?
Yeah.
Talk to the lawyers. You
Wow.
never have to talk to him again if you don't want to. Your lawyers can do the talking. I was like, oh. And that's when I felt like, okay, maybe I have a stronger sense of safety of
Yeah.
like, I just knew that if I had to go back and talk to him and figure out what to do next with the house and the marriage, if I had to try and make those decisions with him, I was not going to be safe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's really important to realize again that you were in this relationship for how long again?
5 years.
5 years. And again, it all starts off with just little steps. And the violence escalated with the first slapping and then punching your friend, pushing you down the stairs. And it was only a matter of time before you would have gotten punched or something worse. Because once he crosses
100%.
the line, he's not going to go back. He's just going to continue to push it forward.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That cycle of violence, it escalates. It gets worse and worse. The violence gets worse and worse over time, starting emotional then physical.
yeah.
And it gets more frequent. There's less time between incidences as time goes on. So had I stayed in there, it would have been much worse.
Yeah, he was definitely escalating. So it was a good thing too that incident was with a
Yeah.
safe where they could get you out of there because you wouldn't have left.
I
You would
hope
have.
so. I mean, there was even times we're having these conversations like as we're driving back to Vegas from Arizona. And my sister's like, you need to think about leaving. And, I was like, but I have my house and my work and my family. And she's like, I had actually been working from home for a company based in the Seattle area. So like my work was not actually keeping me there.
Yeah.
Um, anyways, and I had planted this pomegranate tree. And so I said to my sister, but my pomegranate tree.
Pomegranate tree, right? It was your baby. You put so much love into it.
Yes. I was so proud of this little pomegranate tree. But that's what I was thinking about. Not my safety.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
life, not the humans.
No, but it's like, well, how do I leave? Like, how am and again, like, how do I, and you talk about too, you weren't emotionally strong. You weren't emotionally ready. And even when you make that decision, you really need that support system because your brain literally cannot think, well, how do I leave? What about my pomegranate tree? You're not thinking about your own safety.
Yeah, because of that emotional abuse, right? That's what wore me down to not have that confidence. And so when others hear these kinds of stories and they're like, well, how did they not leave? I mean, there's the trauma bonding, there's the codependency, there's the shame and the guilt, the societal reasons,
Yeah.
and there's the emotional abuse that predicates the physical abuse that wears the person down to begin with.
It's almost in a way like when like I almost kind of think the emotional abuse is a grooming. You're
Yeah,
being groomed to the abuse and you accept it, and it's normalizing it. And it's just so insidious. You don't even realize it when it happens. And oh gosh, it just kind of makes me think of when you said, well, is this domestic violence? And I remember thinking that too. Like, is this, because in my head, domestic violence, right? Like, okay, I grew up in the era of the Farrah Fawcett. Remember the Burning Bed movie? I don't know if you remember, but Farrah Fawcett, she portrayed a great movie where she portrayed a domestic violence victim, and she was just getting beat all the time, and black eyes and things like that. And eventually, she ended up setting fire to her abuser because she's so beat. But in my head, that was domestic violence. So I'm like, well, how can this be DV? Because I'm not getting beaten up. Sure, I'm getting pushed. I've got bruises on my arms. Sure, I've been slapped a couple times. Sure, I got punched once, but that's not domestic violence.
right.
Yeah. And the emotional abuse too, just constantly, being put down and just feeling so bad about yourself all the time. And and I think what people don't realize too, and especially as women, when someone puts down the way you look and your appearance, you just internalize it so much.
Yeah, there's such a societal need to look a certain way, and especially if that way is to make your partner happy.
And what people don't realize too is that when someone is putting you down, it's just constant.
Oh
It's
yeah,
like every day where you're just constantly getting criticized.
and it's so normalized, then you internalize all the messages because that's what you hear all the time.
So when you're constantly getting criticized, constantly you're not good enough, you don't look good enough, you're fat, whatever, you internalize, I'm not good enough.
Mm,
And this person makes me feel good. And only he can make me feel good, or she.
right.
And again, it's not something that happens overnight because it takes time. It's a grooming process that they do on you. And when the good moments happen, that's what your brain latches onto for safety. So again, everyone, I'm just going to read again that quote from your third book, because I think it's just so important. Again, everyone, survivors, friends, families of survivors, please be gentle with yourself and survivors, because the process takes time. Kate, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and being so brave to write these books. I get chicken skin, I get goosebumps just thinking about it, and just how brave you are to just write about it, because it's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for talking about it. Tell us what you're doing now.
Yeah. Well, and just in response, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share about this, to help people, right? The idea is that if you've been through it, then these books will help you understand it. If you
Yes.
have been known someone that's gone through it, it'll especially help you understand what has happened. And if you haven't, then it'll help you prevent it by knowing. So anybody can read these. And so I appreciate just anybody can learn something from the conversation that we had.
And
had
again,
on this.
your books are called Warning Signs. They're a memoir about domestic violence. There's 3 volumes, all easy to read, very engaging to read. It just pulls you into your story. How do people get your books?
Yes. So on my website, so hopefully you can put that in the show notes or however you do. My website is my name. So www.katemageau.com. KATEMAGEAU. So on my website, you can find links to my books. You can get ebooks directly from the website, print books from Barnes & Noble or Amazon. And then you can also see about my counseling. So I do individual counseling with people ages 12 and up on domestic violence, anxiety, depression, PTSD, working with people with neurodiversity, such as ADHD and people on the autism spectrum. Working with people who have experienced trauma, people just wanting to explore like academics and career moves next, all sorts of different things. And I'm also working on creating some counseling groups. So for people wanting to get that support in a group, which I find to be super, super helpful. And I have empowered dating workshops, which are on the third Thursday of every month. So the next one is going to be June 15th. It is at Rainier Hair Studio in West Seattle. So shout out to Megan, the owner there, and her letting me use this space to collaborate. All the information for all that is on my website.
And it's the Empower Dating Workshop. It's going to come up on June 15th, 7 to 9 p.m. at Rainier Hair Studio. Again, that's in West Seattle. And you have that Empower Dating Workshop. Is that every third Thursday?
Every third Thursday, yeah. So the idea is that we talk about warning signs, we talk about boundaries, talk about setting when it's okay to be vulnerable and like tipping toes in to check, looking at the profiles, looking at your own profiles if you want, looking at messages, just explaining and understanding things and working together interactive as a group in the workshop to make sure that we are arming ourselves with knowledge to feel safe and confident about dating and meeting new people.
And how much are the workshops?
$45 per person.
Oh, okay. $45 from 7 to 9 p.m. Oh, so important. And again, her book is called Warning Signs. We've got Kate Mageau here, a memoir about domestic violence. Check it out. Go to her website, Kate, Kate. Mageau is spelled Mageau.com. Thank you so much, Kate, for sharing your story and talking about this difficult subject. And I can't appreciate you enough for being here.
Thank you so much, Lani. I really appreciate this experience and the collaboration with you.
And thank you all for our listeners out there. And hope you enjoy this other episode of the Akiona Law Podcast, wherein we talk about anything and everything that intersects in the area of family law and collaborative divorce. Until next time, I'm Lani Akiona. Be healthy and be safe.
The information in this podcast is general advice only and should not in any respect be relied on as specific legal advice.